From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Tuesday in April, the very first day of April, April Fool's Day. We are not telling any April Fool's jokes. Are you just now realizing that today is April Fool's Day, John?
No. I was at a place today that has like a water dispenser that has like seltzer flavors in it, and there was I went to just like, I don't use the flavors. I just go to, I just hit the water button because it's cold water, which is what you want most of the time. It had like prank flavors.
Really?
It was like, like I think there was like smelly pretzel and like strange things, but like I went and pushed
smelly pretzel.
I don't know. I'm doing injustice to somebody's job was to come up with these, and they're like, he's totally burying it. And I went to push my button, and then like it just said, "Just kidding, April Fools." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I didn't read them.
This sounds like a fancy machine.
It is kind of fancy.
Wow,
it is
really
fancy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like most April Fools. I mean, that one's okay. I feel like most April Fool's Day jokes. I'm not a big prankster in general, so I feel like they usually fall flat for me.
Yeah, I saw Tiger had a good one.
Did he?
Yeah, he basically was like, "Yeah, even though I just blew out my Achilles, I'll be playing the Masters in a couple weeks."
That would have been
April
wild.
Fools. Like,
got him.
That's what they say about Tiger. He's very funny.
Hilarious.
A big jokester.
Very down to earth, not intense.
Yeah.
Today we're not going to talk golf. I love how we always start with a different sport. We're going to talk baseball because that is the name of our show, the Banner Baseball Show. We're going to talk about the Orioles' 3-2 start to the 2025 campaign. They have an off day today. It is a weird off day that was built into the schedule just in case it rained yesterday. It did rain yesterday, but not until well after the game ended. They got beautiful weather for the home opener at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. The place was rocking, John. In a bit, we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned from the first 5 games of the regular season and whether to buy what we've seen or whether to disregard what we've seen. But just yesterday, us being in the ballpark, the atmosphere was awesome. And I think the highlight of all of that was probably the ovations, the continual ovations that were showered upon one Cedric Mullins, because we've been covering Mullins for a long time. We remember back when in 2019, when he was the opening day center fielder and then got demoted twice, finished the season in the Eastern League playoffs, made his way all the way back up, had a 30-30 season. And I think sometimes I at least take for granted the fact that Cedric Mullins is the longest tenured Oriole. He's been here through all of the dark times. And I think fans yesterday were right to take a moment to appreciate his career with the Orioles.
I think Braden Hyde said it well after the game when he said, when we're at our best, it's because Cedric Mullins is at his best. And this is a player who has made a tremendous impact in a lot of ways. And like, I don't really buy the whole like walk here, like, oh, I'm about to do this type thing, but like
go supernova. Yeah.
Because like it's because then you're saying like, oh, I was not trying in those other years when I was not about to be a free agent. Like that's just like kind of a ridiculous premise for me. Like I remember Chris Davis's, when he was hitting all those home runs right ahead of free agency, it was like, I think he's just hitting home runs because he's in a groove. It's not because he wants to get paid more. Like it's not how it works.
Anthony Santander hitting 44 homers in his walk year.
Yes, he did. He did do that. Very recently, but like the idea of like getting the best of Cedric Mullins this year, I think you kind of take for granted what you're going to get from him, period. But as this first however many games has gone on, the idea, like not warming to the idea, but just the idea of him being like, if he's an elevated version of himself, that means something for this team. He started really slowly last year. He had a spell where he was like literally one of the worst hitters in baseball, and he ended up recovering very, very nicely. And this feels like a continuation of that. And for him to do that over the course of the full season, like it has nothing to do with him being appreciated on opening day, but just like talking about his impact is going to be significant.
And lest we forget, he provided the only run for the Orioles offense in 2 playoff games last year on a solo home run. He was the only one in that lineup who really showed up in October.
You talk about the atmosphere. Could you feel like in the middle innings, not, because they started out hot and then it was kind of like a close game. Like, could you kind of feel like the overhang of like last time we were all here, this team was like bitterly disappointing us among like all those people who were filling those seats?
Honestly, I didn't think about that. I didn't make that connection because it's been so long, but I do think there is a little bit of PTSD because the way that the Orioles offense was going in the middle innings, they capitalized in the first inning without hitting a homer. They scored 4 runs in that first inning. And then the middle innings, they kept getting runners on base, and they kept grounding into double plays, which we'll talk about. They kept leaving those runners on base. And I think the way that it happened, we saw last October, we saw the whole second half of last year, they were not capitalizing on golden opportunities when they had runners on base. And if they weren't hitting home runs, they were not scoring a whole lot of runs. So I think that maybe that was in the back of fans' minds when they were watching those middle innings. Were you feeling the tension?
It just, I think it's like pretty dilutive to like, I think that's the word I'm looking for, dilutive to like put it in like an either or, but like there was a long time, in the early rebuild years where like, even when they were winning, you kind of just thought they were going to lose.
Oh yeah.
And like
with that bullpen.
And then it flipped in like 2022 and then like all through 2023, really. Like even when they were losing, you kind of thought they were going to win.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be a surprise when they would have an 8th inning like they did yesterday in a game where they're down 4-2 and all of a sudden it's 6-2 and then the lights are flashing and the Orioles win. And it feels like at some point last year it flipped back to like, I don't know that they're going to get this done. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a process to get back to that. But I felt a little bit of like, it was also like pretty warm where I was like commenting to you and Danielle, like, hey, look at that guy's sunburn. He wasn't ready for this today. Like It was a warm, long day that people were probably having a lot of fun for a majority of. So like 6th, 7th inning, you can lose a little steam, but I felt a little bit of it.
Yeah, there was just a little bit. It didn't help that the new PA system, glad that the Orioles made an effort to address that by adding new speakers out in center field, but at times it was a little over modulated. It was a little bit loud. I think fans might have had a hard time hearing things maybe in the second half of the game because their eardrums had been bombarded for the first half of the game. But who's to say?
Yeah, there was no bass in the sound system for a long time.
That's
so
true.
Like so
baby steps.
Calibrating the bass is next step after getting bass.
Exactly. Another note that we should talk about. Another couple notes. Start with the injury to Albert Suárez because that was a bummer. Ends up on the injured list with right shoulder inflammation. Made one appearance so far over the weekend against Toronto. Gave up an earned run, 2 runs overall in 2 2/3. We talked about him as the ultimate insurance policy in case one of your starters goes down, in case you need help in the bullpen. He can do both. He was awesome for them last year. He had a really, really rough spring. He didn't look awesome in that first start. And John, you've talked about how he kind of remade his body over the offseason, turned a lot of his weight into muscle. And maybe, just maybe, that could be affecting the way that he is moving his body and throwing his pitches.
Yeah. I feel like this happens more than we kind of realize in the moment because it happens at the beginning of the season, then the whole season happens. But like in the context of Sir Anthony Dominguez having like kind of a tough spring, I was looking back. I remember Cino Perez like didn't get anyone out last spring. And he ended up having a good season. And I went back to look, but he also like pitched early. I think he pitched on opening day and maybe one more appearance. And then he went on the IL for like a month. I don't know if it's more like if it's like guys pitching through injuries in spring training, not having good springs, like get to the regular season and realize it's for real. And then you're like, okay, get this figured out, like let it calm down. Or if it's like are you sure your shoulder's not bothering you?
Yeah.
Like type situation. And it's like, now that you mentioned it, my shoulder is bothering me. Not to say that that's what's happening here. I think there's has to be an explanation for this big of a difference. You're talking about somebody who was able to put the ball pretty much where he wanted. One of Albert Suárez's strengths is to be able to move the ball around the zone, put a fastball on the outer half, move one ball outside, keep moving it where he wants. And like to not be that fine without having overpowering stuff is not a good place you want to find yourself in. And if there's anything physical going on, that is going to prevent you from doing that.
Yeah. One guy who did look good to start the season, and that's why this injury is especially devastating, is Colton Cowser. Hit a home run in the first series of the season. You and I were very bullish on the kind of season that Colton Cowser was going to have. We thought it was a possibility. He was going to be an all-star. That seems incredibly unlikely now because he's going to miss, according to Brandon Hyde, about 6 to 8 weeks at the minimum with a broken thumb. It comes just months after he broke his hand, of course, in the playoffs, swinging at a third strike. This time it comes where he's sliding headfirst into first base. Brandon Hyde did defend Colton's decision in terms of sliding headfirst into first base. Fundamentally, we know that's often a bugaboo. It is an instinctive play to dive headfirst into first base. It was a close play in the time. It was an important play in that game, but it is a bummer that a freak injury for the second time in a row. Now, he didn't miss any time with that hand injury because the Orioles got eliminated in that game where he hurt his hand. But then now this comes at a very, very difficult time for him because Orioles are just starting the season. He's out to prove that, he's going to take a step forward.
Yeah, and I think that there is not a through line with the actual injuries themselves, but I think that like the motivation from like having that happen in the way that it did, and his role and how things went, good and bad, last year. Like this is a player who wants to be really good, and he probably wants to. I wrote about it in the newsletter that's probably landing in people's inboxes if they're watching live, like pretty much as we speak. If he beats that out and like that's the start of like a rally and the Orioles go up and take 3 or 4 from Toronto, like beats it out, doesn't get hurt, starts a rally, they win, gets a bigger cheer than he would have normally down the orange carpet. Like there is like, that's a good, I don't know if that's a risk worth taking, but like there is a reward there.
Yeah.
And like for the complete opposite on the downside to happen is really unfortunate. I think if you showed those benefits and said like, you could start a rally and we could win this game, and like we'll have more momentum in March versus like the downside of like you will play again in June by doing this. Like there might be a different decision made, but that's really hard to do in the moment. Somebody who is out there competing, like 4 games on turf in a row to start the season is like challenging. Like Sunday day games, getaway day games are challenging mentally for players to be in that position and be like, I'm going for this. The first weekend of the season is like commendable it's commendable in its like, not for the decision is not commendable. Like what made that happen is commendable. And I think separating that out is really challenging because this is a player that the Orioles are going to need and are going to miss.
Absolutely. In terms of how they replace Colton Cowser, this is why they signed Ramon Laureano. This is why they signed Tyler O'Neill. This is why they signed Dylan Carlson. They added depth upon depth upon depth, and probably they would not have liked to dip into that depth this early in the season, but that's why you build the depth up. I mean, the silver lining, I think, for Orioles fans, and especially fans who are wanting to see Heston Kjerstad get more time, is that when Gunnar Henderson comes back from the injured list, which could be as soon as later this week, according to Brandon Hyde, that Heston Kjerstad will not be the corresponding move to be sent down, because that was the natural. You have 13 position players, 13 pitchers. It was going to be Heston Kjerstad. Odds are. Now it's Dylan Carlson's with the team. Probably, I would guess, is going to be Dylan Carlson when Gunnar Henderson comes back. But we've seen a good look at Ramon Laureano and Dylan Carlson just in a handful of games. I think they will be good players. They so far are over now with the Orioles. That's not ideal, but Ramon Laureano is going to be called upon a whole lot more now that Colton Cowser's out, which 6 to 8 weeks, by the way, earliest 6 weeks would be around Mother's Day, May 11th, May 12th. That would be a miracle situation, I think, for the Orioles. So we're looking at probably early June for Colton Cowser to return. We're going to see a lot of Ramon Laureano. We're going to see a good amount of Heston Kjerstad. We're going to see how this depth is tested.
Yeah, and I think it also will mean a lot more of Tyler O'Neill in spots that you wouldn't have seen him. And this is a player who I think the expectation is you're going to want to manage how much he's on his field. You're going to maybe want to manage a little left right, although that doesn't seem to have been an issue so far this year. And if you are going to need to call on someone, it might as well be like your highest paid free agent. To do that.
Well, that's a perfect transition.
Thanks. I meant to do that.
That was terrific. John is already an expert podcast host. We're going to talk about the things that we are buying from the first week of the season, the things that we are not, the things that are real, and the things that are probably going to change. And one of those things is Tyler O'Neill's outstanding start to the season. Went 4 for 4 yesterday. He's 8 for 15 with a homer, 5 RBIs, and 2 walks. And he's been awesome. And Tyler O'Neill, like you said, coming into this season, we thought he's probably not going to play every game. We knew that. We knew that he was probably going to split some time with Heston Kjerstad. We still expect that to happen, even though Colton Cowser is gone out. But John, have you been surprised at all by the start that Tyler O'Neill has had?
A little bit. I think it's pretty clear what kind of player he is. When he's healthy, I remember watching that game when he walked the Orioles off last year when they had to bring in Keegan Aiken in extra innings, and like they show the graphic, and I was like, Tyler O'Neill has 30 home runs. And like, yes, he did. And like, he was about to add one to that, like momentarily after I had that thought. he struck out a ton last year. It was over a third of his plate appearances. He had pretty pronounced left-right splits. The right on right was not good. He chalked that up to some of the stuff the Red Sox were trying to get him to do with the short porch shot with the green monster. He struck out one time. It's 4 games, but he struck out one time so far this year. He's had almost all of his at-bats have been against righties. He's done well. The swinging strike rate is lower than it was last year. The chase rate is lower than it was last year. Like, there is, the Red Sox are not banging 2 rocks together and trying to get fire. Like, they're a real organization with like smart people but like the way the Orioles teach hitting, sometimes it clicks for guys. And I think that this is the type of benefit you can see with their swing decision emphasis, with their game planning. And he seems like somebody who has fit in really, really well. Now, is he going to have a 1400 OPS for the whole year? Like, I feel confident saying no, but really? Is he going to be? Yeah, then he would opt out. Yeah. I think he would opt out if he did that. Yeah. But he is somebody who, if he can hit righties, as well as better than he has, and if he can, put the ball in play, this is a person who can help this team. And I think we're seeing that.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what he's done when he's healthy. The knock on him as a free agent was not that he wouldn't be able to produce, because he is still in his prime. Over 162 game average for his career, he would be hitting 249 with 30 homers and a 118 OPS plus. That's a very good hitter. Yeah. And a couple of those numbers, OBP for his career is higher than Anthony Santander's. Doesn't hit home runs at quite the same rate, but higher batting average and higher OPS for a career than Anthony Santander. Now, he's not a switch hitter, like you said. He hits lefties a whole lot better than he hits righties. But the knock on him was never that he wasn't a good producer. It was, is he going to be able to stay healthy? And that's why he had to sign what is technically a 3-year deal, but includes 2 opt-outs it includes an opt-out after this season, because he wants to be able to show that he can stay healthy and produce for an entire year and then cash in again during the offseason. The hope was that all of your outfielders are going to be healthy enough to the point where you can keep him off his feet. You can keep him healthier. You can keep him in situations where he's facing lefties a lot more than he's facing righties, because you have Colton Cowser and you have Heston Kjerstad. Cowser's injury just makes that a little bit tougher, and it won't be the case the whole season. Once Cowser comes back, then you're talking about using Tyler O'Neill a little bit less and a little bit more selectively, but he's going to be called upon a little bit more, and that might maybe hinder his availability and also his productiveness.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how much the plan changes. It felt pretty clear that they were sticking to some kind of plan, like through the first series plus of like, okay, like Jordan Westburg was getting that day off no matter what on Sunday,
which was very surprising. I won't lie. When Jordan Westburg starts the season with 3 home runs in the first 3 games of the season, then gets a day off in the series finale in Toronto. I understand the turf is a big issue and they want to keep him off his feet, but that was very surprising to not see Jordan Westburg in that lineup.
Yeah. And that kind of goes to the broader point of this team kind of making it feels very different for them to be making long-term decisions and stuff like that. Like that, it's objectively a good thing to do. If he needs to rest him. You don't want Jordan Westburg wearing down. But I'm fascinated to see just how much they ride this Tyler O'Neill wave. Is he going to get the days off that they planned on him having? He's already gotten one this year. Is he going to continue to do that? And I think the answer is probably going to be yes. You might not love the idea, if you wanted to have a lefty day and you wanted to stick Jorge Mateo in a corner and Laureano in center and get Cedric Mullins and Tyler O'Neill off their feet. Not the worst thing in the world to do. You're not going to have as good of a lineup, but you might have a better team in the second half if you do that. And it seems like a balance that they're willing to strike in a way that I feel like they haven't been before.
Yeah. Let's talk about Orioles hitting into double plays, because John, this was
hilarious.
Very funny. During yesterday's game, we sit next to each other in the press box and you turned it to me and said, have the Orioles hit into 3 double plays today? And I said, yes, they have. And you said, weren't we just talking on the podcast about how they never hit into double plays last year? And I said, yes, we were. They hit into 71 double plays last year, according to Slate magazine, which was able to pick up the stat and none of us recognized, which was the lowest ever by a team in a full season. And they've already hit into, so far, 4 in the first 5 games. Is this going to stick or is this going to disappear?
I don't think they're going to set any records, but so. They're circumstantial, but I think Jorge Mateo had one of those at least. That's one of the last people you'd expect. You have to basically hit the ball right at someone in a double play situation with less than 2. Like that's the type of thing that like it could have happened like a half dozen times last year instead it happened 0 times. And like it might happen a half dozen times this year and they might all end up being double plays. It was like, and it's easy to laugh about it because like eventually Alex Bregman fell on his face and like everything opened up in that 8th inning and they won. But when I say like, is there an overhang of like, they didn't ground into a lot of double plays last year, but like a lot of double plays ended innings yesterday and it felt weird.
Yes. And this team, the fact that they were able to win that game yesterday because of good situational hitting at the beginning and the end, despite the fact that they kind of disappeared in the middle, I think was a good sign. But also this team is still going to rely heavily on homers. And that's something that we said about them all of last year was when they hit 1 or more homers, their chances of winning that game increased significantly, which is how it is. Home runs are automatic runs. It's in the name. But this team is still going to be very reliant on home runs. Probably, hopefully, a little bit less so. But this team's going to hit a lot, and they're going to score a lot of their runs from the home run.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ever say that's not good.
Yeah.
Ever. I'm never going to say that that's not good. I think just as a principle, I wonder if it's more just like these guys getting these hits in these moments is like, Brandon Hyde was asked about Heston Kjerstad's after a couple tough at bats to say like, all right, 97 down and away, poke it the other way. Like
that was a beautiful hit in the 8th inning yesterday.
Great hit. Nothing about like, I would be fascinated to know if that's like I want to put the ball in play. If he's protecting, like if you're just a strong player, like a strong man and you protect out there and like you're able to hit it through the gap, or if it's like a change in approach. I'm very interested to know that actually. Maybe I'll ask him about it sometime this week because
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I can and I will. I don't know how much they were trying to hit singles, but like the fact that they made it the kind of rally that honestly they didn't have a lot in the second half last year.
Yeah, and that broke up an offer to start the season for Heston Kjerstad. One guy who is still not off the schneid is Jorge Mateo, who is 0 for 6 to start the year with 3 Ks. He came in and pinch ran yesterday, which was nice to see him flying around the bases. But I'm not too surprised. This is one of those things that I don't expect to stick because he's coming back from Tommy John. He hasn't played in a regular season game since last August. And frankly, I was very surprised that he made the opening day roster. I thought, given the timeline, it would have been a minor miracle that he made the opening day roster, but there he was. And so I think it's going to take some time for Jorge Mateo to get up to speed, pun intended.
Yeah. I'm Jorge Mateo challenged just as a concept. He has been as a concept. I am challenged with Jorge Mateo. This is somebody who like has over like 3+ years had like 3 months as like a really good hitter.
Yeah.
And like most of the rest of the months have been below average or worse.
Well, 2 years ago, he had an awesome April. Last year, he had an awesome May. So maybe this year, he's going to have an awesome June.
Yeah, that's a long time to wait and to be a passenger on this team. Not to say that they won't, Lord knows there's been stretches where they've been waiting for the bat to come back around that have been longer than that or felt longer than that. But yeah, this is in the monitoring category for me. I don't know. I think he's fortunate in that like what he does is valuable. Part of the reason I've kind of changed my thinking about like Enrique Bradfield as a prospect is like the way that Jorge Mateo impacts games.
Yeah.
Is like similar, and like the Orioles clearly value that, and they clearly will find a use for that when it happens. But you need to be able to produce when called upon, and there's also more so now, especially it seems like we're in a good Ramon Urias moment. So far this year, Jordan Westberg is hitting very, very well to start the season. Gunnar Henderson is about to come back. Like you're going to need to earn your opportunities, and it's going to be hard to do that in that context. And that means it's going to be hard to get into a rhythm, and that means it's going to be harder to earn opportunities. And like, this is something that might not be able to like build on itself in a positive way.
The tough part is Jorge Mateo is built for a playoff roster. He's not as much built for a regular season roster, because a playoff roster could use a guy like that. I thought a couple of years ago when Joey Ortiz was still mashing in AAA and he was knocking on the door, I thought there was a chance at that point that was going to be the last time that we saw Jorge Mateo, and that they were going to turn the leaf over to Joey Ortiz. It didn't happen because I think the Orioles just want to see him be a factor on the bases in an October game. I mean, think about, he comes in as a pinch runner. what he can do for a team. We saw yesterday, first and third, they bring him in to pinch run, I think for Kjerstad.
Yeah.
And he steals second base. I mean, that's the kind of speed that he can have to impact a game. The thing is, I don't think his defense is as needed on this team when you already have 3, maybe 4 very good infield defenders. Jordan Westbrook's a good defender. Ramon Arias is taking some steps back. He's former Gold Glove winner, though, at third base. Obviously, Gunnar Henderson is a very, very good defensive shortstop. Jackson Holliday had made some errors last year, but he has all the tools to be a very good second baseman. But that speed is just a weapon for a playoff series. It's just, can he be your passenger, like you said, on this roster for 6 months just to get to October?
Yeah, and we're learning, without this Colton Cowser injury, like we would have been in the point where there's not a lot of like flexibility on this roster, and we're about to get to that point. We're about to get to that point even with this. Like once Gunnar Henderson is back, like you're gonna be looking at it being like, what's I've mentally arrived at the point where like I've thought it was going to be Jorge Mateo's moment to move on so many times, and it's not happened, that I'm no longer doing that. So I'm not going to sit here and think about like what's going to happen in a couple weeks if something, I'm not going to do that. I just am challenged to think that like what we're seeing now, of course he's going to get some hits at some point soon. I'm just challenged to think that it's going to go from this to like the best of Jorge Mateo, because that best is not as frequently seen as memories serve.
Yep. Well said. Let's talk about the pitching side. Let's talk about what we saw from the starting pitchers. We saw some rough starts in Toronto from 3 of your middle of the rotation guys and 2 guys that you acquired this offseason. Charlie Morton, 4 earned runs and 3 1/3 on Friday. Tomoyuki Sugano, 2 earned runs in 4 innings on Sunday, left that game with cramps in both hands. Not ideal. And then Dean Kramer also wasn't great on Saturday with 5 earned runs. How concerning were the starts, especially from the guys that you signed to 1-year deals in Morton and Sugano? How concerning should those starts be to Orioles fans, John?
It seemed like Tomoyuki Sugano kind of got into a rhythm before he, the 4-pitch walk to start his big league career is going to be, it's either going to be like a hilarious thing to think back on or like an omen that we're going to be like, oh man, we didn't have to wait long to find out. I'm going to give him a little bit of slack on that. I think I literally just wrote it, but the newsletter this week was about the rotation, and it's like, first time through, and like you don't really want to be talking about like a 6.3 ERA as a group, and like there's some better underlying stuff like FIP and stuff, but there's also like based on like expected stats, like could be a lot worse. So depends on how you want to look at it. I think it's just like it's a little uncomfortable at this point. But it was, the White Sox also, their rotation hasn't given up a run, and like they're terrible and are going to be terrible. So like it's so early that you're games, like, it's so, but and I think about that in the context of like if the Orioles rotation, and they will have stretches where this group specifically, because there's no one else to pitch in the rotation for the foreseeable future. Yeah, they're going to have good spells, but I think what you saw is a combination of like early season stuff where like guys you don't really want somebody like grinding into like the 90s, like 90 some pitches in like the 4th inning. Like you just kind of wear it and take them out. But I think it's kind of getting used to like the fact that like they're going to have to be more economical. I think that's where I come down. Like good, bad, like the 3-2, the starters haven't really lost them any games. Like the games that they haven't done what they should have done offensively, they've lost. In the games that they have scored a ton of runs, they've won, no matter how good or bad the starting pitching was. But I think I am kind of in the monitoring category of like, can these guys be efficient? Brandon Hyde said yesterday, he was like, those 20 pitches that are just misses for Cade Bovich, like if those sharpen up, we're talking about somebody who could pitch deeper, but like 20 pitches is like a quarter of the pitches that he has available in the game. Like you need to do that. You need to do that if that's something that you need to do. Yeah. Charlie Morton's, I'm going to, again, I mean, I think he would know, and we would know if he was really done, but like that just wasn't a good start. And like the next one could be, but I think they're going to need a little more. I think it's safe to say.
This is why Mike Elias sprinkled $10 million, $15 million here or there, because these are 1-year gambles. These are 1-year shots on Tomoyuki Sugano, on Charlie Morton, on Kyle Gibson, $5 million. I don't think the Orioles are expecting every one of these guys to hit, because at a certain point you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
But one of them has to. You need at least one of these guys. And we'll throw Dean Kramer in that category as well. Cade Povich, Sugano. They need to step up.
Yeah.
And you need one of those guys to be good. Because, I mean, in theory, if everything works out the way it should, where you're hoping, by the time we get to September, you could be looking at a rotation of Grayson Rodriguez and Zach Eflin and Kyle Bradish. And then you just need two guys, whether it be Kramer, Tyler Wells coming back, Sugano, Povich, Chase McDermott. You just need a couple other guys to fill out that rotation. So that's if everything goes according to plan. And we've seen how, God laughs at what you plan. But it's not the end of the world if one of these signings doesn't work out. But one of them has to, right?
Yeah. And I think that's, I think there's more pressure than this group needs to have on it right now, because, with Albert Suárez going down, like, there's a lot of guys who are still getting ready in Sarasota, but like, this is kind of the rotation for now. Like, maybe Cody Poteet is like stretched out. I think he appeared in 2 games in spring for the Cubs. Like, it's not necessarily like a rotation depth option in my mind right now.
Yeah.
Brandon Young had a good first outing, but like, still getting his feet wet in AAA, like, still pretty young in the process for that. Like, these are the guys they got.
Yeah.
Like, there's no real, and that'll change when Kyle Gibson is ready, and that'll change,
Chase McDermott,
Trevor Rogers, like Grayson Rodriguez, that will change at some point. But like, that kind of like, what are we going to do feeling that made the Orioles go out and make the trade deadline acquisitions they did and get Zach Eflin and kind of like reshuffle the pitching staff. Like, that was done because they were having a month where like they just didn't have the guy. They didn't have the horses. They didn't have the guys who could do the job. They had a really bad month on the mound. They're not having that now. The rotation had a bad turn, but there isn't like a lot of flexibility. There isn't a lot of flexibility outside these 5 guys. And I think that puts a little more pressure than anyone would be comfortable with in having them be, you need them to be good enough right now. It's not like a let's see how this goes thing. Like, I think you need these guys to help you win these games right now.
Definitely. All right. The thing that might be the most concerning on this list is the decreased velocity and the troubling couple outings from Félix Bautista. Made his first outing of the year a couple days ago in Toronto. Did not give up a run, gave up a double, gave up a walk, but did strike 3 guys out. Yesterday at Camden Yards, it was a little rockier. Fortunately, he did not have to come into a 1-run game like he was preparing to do. It was a 1-run game when he started warming up, and it ended up being, a 5-run lead by the time he ended up coming into that game.
Yeah.
Good that the Orioles got him some cushion because he allowed 2 runs on 2 hits, 2 walks, did not strike out a batter. He did end up getting all 3 outs that he needed to. He was warming up, I will say, for a long time, because that ended up being a marathon inning for the Orioles. So maybe he was overwarmed. I think the Orioles didn't want to, I don't want to use the Buck Showalter term. But,
yeah, you're not going to not pitch him at that point. But he was standing there watching this happen for a while. There is a certain buzz to like being a closer and like getting the whole, like, doing your whole deal and walking in with sounds and lights, and like it was light out and and there was a 5-run lead, and like there's a natural deflation. I am fascinated to see. He's going to get a ton of rope. I think that like I think we're gonna keep the streak going of talking about Craig Kimbrell, but like there's so much like that was like there was no rope there basically. It was like this happened like early in the season, and everyone's like, this guy, what are we doing here? Félix Bautista, like they won, so like all's
they
well
won both games.
All's well that ends well. He's just going to have a lot of rope, and like I think they're going to give it to him, but like where does that rope lead? Like if this keeps happening and it's May and there's a couple of blown save losses in there, like, are you going to start using them in a different time? Like, are you going to say like, let's pump the brakes and like, do you do that? And that was kind of where I landed on my column yesterday. It's like, Brandon Hyde is like completely right. It's going to take a while. Like, you can't just come back and like be dominant. Like we saw Zach Britton return from injuries and like want to be the same guy, and it's hard to do that.
He was in the stadium yesterday.
He was. I saw that. Yeah, his brother's bench game.
Yeah, I don't know if you know.
Yeah. I didn't even make the connection. I just saw that he was there, and then I saw them on the field after the game, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's."
I saw him sitting next to Buck Britton's like wife and kid, and I was like, "Ah, that's why."
That's how it happens. Yeah, that's. But it strikes me that like there's so much like, well, this is gonna happen. Like Felix will be good, and like so and so will be back, and this and that. And like there's a lot of that on this team.
Yeah.
The difference is that his is happening right in front of us. Like. We can like fantasize is a weird word. We can fantasize about Kyle Bradish we can think about what that's going to happen in July, but like we don't really know what's happening in the interim. It's not happening in front of us. Like he might throw some bullpens, he might be around like playing catch, but like this is going to be like on the field having an impact on the season. And there's not really a lot of precedent in this like Orioles era of like letting somebody figure it out like that in front of us when they're trying to win. Yeah, that's challenging, and I think it's going to be pretty fascinating to see how they handle it.
Well, right now his fastball is not the same as it was prior to his injury. Sinker is down to 97.4 miles an hour in those two outings. That was 99.5 back in 2023. And you mentioned this is playing out in front of us. We are seeing this happen, and at some point, he is going to be in a game where it is a one-run lead, and that's probably going to happen sooner rather than later because the Orioles showed yesterday that they were willing to do that, willing to put him in that situation. Do you think that the Orioles maybe should have given Félix Bautista some outings against AAA pitchers in order to make sure that fastball velocity got back up to where it was before throwing him into the fire?
I don't know. I also don't. I think they kind of find it out in spring training. Like when it's spring training and he's throwing like 97, 98, you could say like, oh, it's not, it's not up there. It's not up there. And when it's not like a close save situation, like I'm not saying that he's like ramping down but I think
he shouldn't be emptying the tank in a 8-3 game.
Yeah. But there's a difference. Like if this game happened, we keep referencing 2022 or 23. If that type of thing happened, it would have been like a 7-pitch ninth inning. He would have just gone in, like blasted 100 by guys and like gotten a pop up and punch out and like a weak ground ball, and he would have gotten a hug from Matt. Like it would have just been really, really fast. And like that is when that's your floor. That's what happens. Like it's just a lower floor right now until he gets himself going. I don't know if AAA, any kind of rehab assignment would have made sense. And I think it's almost good to have him start where he's meant to be, because if you are bringing him in weird spots in the 6th, trying to find a clean inning for him, trying not to go, like if that doesn't work out, there's not really like anywhere to go to regress from there. So if you have him in this role and like you're willing to take a lump or two and like maybe lose a game you didn't want to lose for the purpose of having him back in that consistent role, you take that risk with the knowledge that if it's May and he's still not throwing as hard or commanding the ball, then you can say, all right, we're going to pump the brakes. Like we're going to get you back where you want to go. But like right now you're going to do this and somebody else is going to close.
Right.
You can't really do that if he's already pitching the 7th. And it's like, and cause it's really hard. Like this, Craig Kimbrell's a different animal again, but like when you're trying to find somebody who used to be a closer, like a nice spot to get into a game, those nice spots never materialize. A lot of spots materialize for like the Matt Bowmans and the Jacob Webbs of the world, but like fallen closer spots are harder to come by.
Yeah. We only need to now mention Tony Kemp in order to fulfill our quota of mentioning Craig Kimbrell and Tony Kemp on every one of our episodes.
His marketing people who have like searches going from are like, what did we ever do to these people?
They absolutely hate us.
He gave me a really nice interview, and I still think about it to this day. He was a nice man, Tony Kemp.
That's the thing. Tony Kemp was great, and everybody raved about who he was in the clubhouse. And he came in, he shook all our hands before opening day. He was awesome.
Yeah, and now here we are still talking about it.
Unfortunately. One final thing that I got to know if this is true or not, John. Did the Red Sox break Rafael Devers? Is that for real or is that fake?
It seems so. It seems like he is in a tough way right now.
0 for 19 with 15 Ks.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking before we went on about the Chris Davis 0 for streak. Yeah. Talk about like Joe DiMaggio, like records you never thought would be broken, let alone challenged. Like we're still I guess we're only a week away from it, but like
for 54, I'm pretty sure that's like 35 at bats.
That's
I think that was Chris. My favorite thing about him breaking the streak was he did it up at Fenway, I think opening series, and then got like 2 other hits in that game.
Yeah. And then it was like, and that was like a weird time. Like it was always a weird time around those Orioles, and like it got to be a weird time with Chris Davis, but like that was like very clearly like he was just like a very old player on like a very young team. And like I think that was like a charming moment in that 2019 season when like everyone like went nuts like in the clubhouse for him, and it was pretty, everyone was kind of like fired up for it, but like it's also a ridiculous thing to be fired up for, like this man who should be like getting more hits than he did at that time.
Yeah, I do love the image though of him with his arms up to the sky, thanking the heavens for breaking that streak.
Yeah, it said he like walked in like, like doing like Frank the Tank. He was like,
Well, we'll see if Rafael Devers gets to that point.
I think the vibes are, I think the vibes are a little different where it comes to Mr. Devers at this point.
Probably.
He might have been, I get it if I was him, but
been a tumultuous spring training into the season.
It's been a tough spring, but it was a long time ago that they signed Alex Bregman. Like
he's got to figure it out.
Get some hits.
Yep. All right. Well, that just about does it for our podcast today. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. And of course, he referenced his newsletter and he referenced his columns, all of which you can find on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe. $1 for 6 months. All very exciting.
I'm showing Paul right now, like the Inside the Dugout newsletter and my column both got emailed out at the exact same time. At the exact same time. Just now.
Hit your inbox just like that.
Yeah. I have to make sure. Sometimes I'll go through them and I'll realize I didn't even open them, but like I got to help my own metrics.
Yeah.
Here. I got to juice the numbers for myself a little bit.
Get that open percentage up. And read percentage up a little bit higher.
Yeah, click the links.
Exactly.
Spend a long time on the links.
And what you can do for our podcast, in addition to listening to it and watching it, if you're watching it live on X or on YouTube, you can also drop us a 5-star review and I'll read it out here on the show, on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5 stars on Spotify. Anywhere that you are getting your podcast, you can get the Banner Baseball Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back at some point next week with more games to recap. In the meantime, enjoy the Orioles series against the Boston Red Sox. 2 more games at home before they head off to Kansas City. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.